Hello. Today I would like to briefly talk about some of the day-to-day activities that investor relations officers are involved in. We kind of touched upon several of them when we talked about disclosure, when we talked about legal regulations, when we talked about annual reports, but I want to put it all in one place. So, first of all, and again, I mentioned it many times, investor relations officers are responsible for conducting research. And it's a lot of different types of research. Shareholder research is very, very common and usually takes a lot of time. You need to know who are the shareholders of your company. You need to know how the shareholder mix is changing. You need to know if you're getting closer or more far away from the ideal shareholder mix that is a goal for your particular corporation. But this is not all the research. There are a lot of other types of research that you have to conduct, and for me personally, I spent a lot of time conducting research on my own company. The company I worked for was involved in a lot of machine building and metallurgy and special steels production, and all that technology I was asked questions about, and I had no idea about how it all works. And for investor relations officer, it's important to actually understand the business of the company they represent, because you can be asked about it. And so, without any special degree in steels and alloys, I had to learn a lot of information about steels and alloys. And the same is true for any other company. If you're working as investor relations officer for biotechnology company, you have to become knowledgeable about biotechnology. If you are working as an investor relations officer for a transportation company, you have to become knowledgeable about transportation. So research on the shareholders and research on the company you represent, extremely important, very time consuming, but you cannot really do your job without it. Second very common activity for investor relations officers are those periodic reports that we discussed. This, of course, is the annual report. This is a very important document that investor relations officers are responsible for, but there are also quarterly reports. I, for example, had to do a weekly report to the CEO of the company about what's going on with our stock in this particular week, how the price was changing, how the trading volume was changing, and if we had any changes in the shareholders. So all these periodic reports also take time to generate and to prepare. A lot of the work is done in management training. The management, the CEO of the company, CFO of the company, maybe COO of the company, often meet with investors. And it is a job of investor relations officers to prepare them for that. They get phone calls from the investors, and again, it's a job of the company to prepare them for that and making sure that everything they say is in compliance with the laws and regulations. There are obviously an important part of the job is building and maintaining relationship with investors and shareholders of the company. Many investors and shareholders love to conduct one-on-one meetings. This is when they arrive to your facility, maybe they to the factory, maybe they just go meet with the financial people, depending upon what they're interested in. And again, you have to prepare this, train whoever is going to be talking with them, making sure everything is in compliance with laws and regulations. There are also investment conferences. It might be an industry conference where all transportation companies, for example, present to different investors. It might be a sell-side organized conference where different companies that they are recommending for purchase are participating. A lot of phone conversations. Investor relations officer spends a lot of time on the phone, and it might be responding to requests from shareholders, responding to questions they have about whatever report you put out, for example, or quarterly earnings or whatever it may be, or it might be you reaching out to investors and trying to maybe increase more financial analyst coverage for your company, or maybe trying to identify more appropriate investors, marketing your company to investors. And there are a lot of different tours that are happening, especially if you go through initial public offerings, you're expected to conduct a road show, and then many companies, they have an annual road shows that they go to different locations where the investors are situated, and then meet with them and communicate with them and update them on what's going on with the company. And the shareholders in the investor relations, quite often to call big professional investors as investors, while individual shareholders call shareholders. And the shareholders, although they don't own a lot of stock, at least in my experience, they take a lot of time, and so you have to maybe spend some more time explaining what is going on. You may have to spend a little bit more effort helping them on different issues they may be facing, answering their questions. But these individual shareholders, as I said, sometimes require an additional effort to for the investor relations officer. So here is the research that was conducted several years ago that asked investor relations officers of Fortune 500 companies to rank different tasks that they do on a daily basis on a scale from 1 to 4, where 4 meant most often and 1 was never. As you can see, the most common 2 activities that investor relations officers identified was: number 1, responding to requests from shareholders, analysts, and stockbrokers. It's almost 4 on a 4-point scale, so it's almost all the time. And the second one, with the same number, 3.93, is road shows, presentations, and conferences. So these are the activities that investor relations officers are involved in a lot. But what is very interesting to me, if you look at the number 3, is providing information to top management or other department of the organization. So the third most important activity is not the out-focusing activity. It's not communication to shareholders. It's the other way around. It's bringing the information from the stock market, from the analyst, to the management of the company. And so this really, I think, is very telling that investor relations is extremely focused on two-way communication. It's really trying to establish that balance of information between your management and the shareholders, helping to create that conversation, that dialogue. It's not just pushing the information out one way. It is actual dialogue and two-way communication. And then again, the same research asked the investor relations officers at Fortune 500 company what publics they consider the most important and which ones they consider the least important. And as you can see, the number 1, no argument there, the most important public would be institutional investors such as mutual funds, pension funds, and similar. And on the second line, stock analysts, brokers, and similar. And the third, again, internal publics, employees, management, and similar. So these are the most important publics, and we talked about all of them. This is what you are focusing on as an investor relations officer. This is what you do a lot. All right, so these are the most common activities of the investor relations practitioners.